Today, we're going to explore one of the most powerful tools your brain has, willpower, and I want you to think of willpower not as some mysterious gift you're either born with or not, but as a trainable skill, just like strength or endurance. Science shows that willpower lives in specific circuits of the brain, and by understanding how those circuits work, you can literally rewire yourself to stay disciplined even when you don't feel like it. By the end of this talk, you'll know the exact science-backed steps to build willpower so strong that it becomes part of who you are. Most people think of willpower as something you either have or don't have, almost like eye, color, or height fixed traits that you're born with and have no control over. But neuroscience shows us that this isn't true. Willpower is not some mystical force that shows up randomly. It's a function of your brain and body, and that means it can be trained, strengthened, and improved over time. In fact, the very circuits that govern self-control live in the prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain responsible for decision making, focus, and planning. When we talk about building willpower, what we're really talking about is strengthening those neural pathways so that choosing discipline becomes easier and more automatic. One of the most important things to understand about willpower is that it works like a muscle. If you challenge it in the right way, not too much, not too little, it grows stronger. If you never challenge it, it weakens. This is why some people feel completely powerless to resist temptation or procrastination. They've simply never given those circuits enough repetition to get stronger. Neuroscientists call this process neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on what we repeatedly do. Every time you resist an impulse, delay gratification, or stick to a plan despite discomfort, you are literally teaching your brain how to make that behavior more efficient next time. This means that even if you feel like you have no willpower, you can start small and train it gradually. Imagine someone who has never worked out trying to lift a heavy barbell. They wouldn't start with the maximum weight. They would start light and build up over time. Willpower works the same way. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You just need to practice small acts of self-control consistently. For example, putting your phone down for 5 minutes when you want to scroll, getting out of bed the first time the alarm rings, or choosing water instead of soda. These micro decisions might seem small, but they are actually reps for your willpower muscle. Over time, these reps add up and create stronger neural connections in the brain. Another crucial factor is state management. Your brain's capacity for willpower is influenced by your sleep, nutrition, and emotional state. When you are tired or stressed, the prefrontal cortex becomes less effective at controlling impulses. This is why you might feel like you can't stick to your plans late at night or when you're overwhelmed. It isn't because you're weak, it's because the system that governs willpower is under-resourced. By prioritizing sleep, eating nutrient-rich foods that stabilize blood sugar, and practicing stress reduction techniques like deep breathing or a short walk, you give your brain the resources it needs to make better choices. What's fascinating is that the more you engage in willpower training, the more confidence you build in yourself. This creates a positive feedback loop. When you prove to yourself that you can follow through on even small promises, your brain starts to update its prediction about who you are. Instead of thinking, "I'm someone who can't stick to things," it shifts to, "I'm someone who does what I say I'm going to do." This identity shift makes future acts of willpower feel less like a fight and more like a natural extension of who you are. When we think about building self-control, most people imagine making huge life changes all at once, like quitting every bad habit overnight or completely restructuring their schedule, but the science is clear. The brain doesn't respond well to overwhelming all or nothing approaches. Instead, the most effective way to develop self-control is through small, consistent actions repeated daily. Each one of these actions strengthens the neural circuits in the brain that control focus, impulse regulation, and decision making. The key is repetition. Every small habit you perform is like doing a single rep at the gym, and those reps compound over time into measurable strength. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for willpower and executive function, thrives on regular activation. Think of it as a muscle that gets stronger when used consistently. If you only test your self-control in extreme situations like resisting a huge temptation after months of indulgence, you're asking a weak circuit to do heavy lifting it hasn't been prepared for. Instead, if you train that circuit with small, manageable habits every single day, you're giving it the right dose of stimulation to grow stronger without burning out. One of the simplest examples of this is creating morning rituals. Starting your day with one small habit that you stick to consistently sends a powerful signal to the brain: I am in control. This could be something as simple as making your bed, drinking a glass of water before coffee, or doing 2 minutes of deep breathing before looking at your phone. These habits may seem almost too small to matter, but they are rewiring your brain at a foundational level. By repeatedly engaging the circuits responsible for planning and action, you're making them more efficient and more accessible when you face bigger challenges later in the day. Another powerful tool is habit stacking, where you link a new small habit to something you already do automatically. For instance, if you brush your teeth every morning, you could add a 30-second gratitude reflection immediately afterward. The existing habit acts as a trigger, making the new habit easier to adopt. Over time, your brain starts to expect this sequence of actions, and what once felt like effort becomes almost automatic. This is the essence of how small habits create large-scale behavioral change. They turn deliberate acts into default behaviors by strengthening the neural pathways through repetition. Science also shows that the timing of habits matters. Performing small acts of self-control early in the day can set you up for greater discipline throughout the day. This is because early victories build what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that you can influence your own behavior. When you accumulate several of these small wins in a row, your brain starts to anticipate success, and this anticipation becomes a motivator that fuels more disciplined actions. What's remarkable is that these habits don't just change behavior in the moment, they remodel the brain physically. Repeated daily habits lead to changes in the density of synaptic connections in the prefrontal cortex. This is neuroplasticity in action. You are literally reshaping your brain through what you do repeatedly. This is why consistency matters so much more than intensity at the beginning. A habit done for 2 minutes every day for 30 days has more impact on your brain circuitry than a habit done for 30 minutes once a week. It's not about heroic effort, it's about steady, repeated engagement that teaches the brain what to expect and what to prioritize. Stress is one of the biggest enemies of willpower, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. Most people think stress is just a feeling, being anxious, overwhelmed, or tense, but physiologically, stress is a full body response that shifts how your brain operates. When you're under stress, your brain's amygdala becomes more active, scanning for threats, while your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational decision-making and self-control, becomes less active. This means that in moments of high stress, you are biologically primed to choose short-term relief over long-term goals. That's why people break diets, skip workouts, or procrastinate more when they're stressed. It isn't weakness, it's a predictable neurochemical shift. The key is learning to manage stress so that the prefrontal cortex stays online and you can continue to make deliberate choices. Managing stress doesn't mean eliminating it completely. In fact, some stress is actually beneficial for building resilience. What you want to do is keep stress within the optimal zone, where it sharpens focus rather than overwhelms you. One of the simplest ways to do this is through breath work. Slow, deliberate exhalations have been shown to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which lowers heart rate and signals to the brain that you are safe. Even a single minute of physiological size, 2 quick inhales through the nose followed by a long exhale through the mouth, can rapidly reduce stress and restore mental clarity. By using this tool in moments of pressure, you create space between stimulus and response, giving your brain time to choose the disciplined action rather than the impulsive one. Sleep is another crucial factor. When you are sleep-deprived, your stress hormones remain elevated and the prefrontal cortex becomes less effective at regulating behavior. Studies show that even one night of poor sleep can increase emotional reactivity and make it harder to resist temptation. Prioritizing consistent sleep, aiming for 7 to 9 hours depending on individual needs, is one of the most powerful ways to keep your stress system balanced and preserve your capacity for willpower. Physical movement also plays a major role in stress regulation. Exercise is not just about building muscle or burning calories. It's one of the most potent ways to recalibrate the stress response. When you move your body, you increase blood flow to the brain, release endorphins, and help clear stress hormones like cortisol from your system. Even a short walk can shift your state and put you back into a mindset where disciplined action feels possible again. Another overlooked but powerful way to manage stress is through social connection and mindset. When you interpret stress as a challenge rather than a threat, your body actually produces a different hormonal cocktail, one that includes more DHE, which helps protect your brain from the negative effects of cortisol. Similarly, spending time with people who are calm and supportive can regulate your own nervous system through a process called co-regulation. This is why surrounding yourself with grounded, disciplined individuals can make it easier for you to stay on track when life gets difficult. The goal isn't to wait for a stress-free life before practicing discipline that will never happen. The goal is to train your brain and body to return to a calm, centered state quickly after stress arises so that the part of you capable of making rational decisions stays in control. By developing daily practices that regulate your nervous system, you are essentially keeping the prefrontal cortex in charge, which allows willpower and focus to remain accessible even when circumstances are hard. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort. We seek comfort in temperature, comfort in food, comfort in entertainment, comfort in conversation. While there's nothing wrong with enjoying comfort in healthy doses, the problem is that constant comfort weakens our ability to handle stress and challenge. The brain and body are designed to adapt to stressors. This is what scientists call hormesis, the process where a small, manageable amount of stress makes you stronger. When you deliberately expose yourself to controlled discomfort, you teach your nervous system that it can handle more than it thought it could, and this increases your capacity for willpower and discipline. Deliberate discomfort can take many forms, and it doesn't have to be extreme. One of the most well-studied examples is cold exposure. When you put yourself in a cold shower or ice bath, your body immediately activates the stress response. Your breathing speeds up, adrenaline spikes, and your brain urges you to get out. But when you stay calm, regulate your breathing, and remain in the cold for just a few minutes, you are literally training your prefrontal cortex to override the impulse to escape. Over time, this practice builds neural resilience. The circuits involved in stress regulation and focus become more efficient, and you become better at staying calm under pressure in other areas of life. Another simple but powerful form of deliberate discomfort is exercise that challenges you just beyond your comfort zone. This doesn't have to mean running ultramarathons or lifting the heaviest weights at the gym. It can be as simple as doing one more rep when you want to stop, or holding a plank for 10 seconds longer than is comfortable. Each time you push slightly past the point of wanting to quit, you strengthen the neural pathways that allow you to choose effort over avoidance. This isn't just physical training, it's brain training, and it carries over into mental tasks like sticking with a difficult project or having a tough conversation. Fasting or delaying gratification is another method of controlled discomfort that can build discipline. When you intentionally wait a little longer to eat your first meal or skip a snack even when you feel hungry, you're not just testing your body's energy systems, you're testing your brain's ability to sit with an urge and not act on it immediately. This is one of the core skills of willpower, the ability to experience a craving or impulse and choose not to obey it. By practicing this skill in small ways, you make it easier to apply in bigger situations where more is at stake. Deliberate discomfort also has a profound psychological effect. Each time you voluntarily choose something difficult, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of doing hard things. This creates a shift in identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who avoids challenges, you begin to see yourself as someone who leans into them. That identity shift makes future challenges feel less threatening and more like opportunities to grow. Your nervous system also starts to recalibrate its baseline. Things that once felt uncomfortable start to feel normal, which raises your overall tolerance for stress and pressure. Even simple practices like turning down the temperature in your room, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or spending a few minutes sitting in silence without reaching for your phone can be forms of deliberate discomfort. These micro-challenges accumulate and build a reservoir of resilience that you can draw from when life presents bigger obstacles. By choosing discomfort in small doses, you inoculate yourself against being overwhelmed by the discomforts you don't choose. One of the most overlooked aspects of building willpower is clarity. When your brain doesn't know exactly what you're aiming for, it becomes much harder to engage the circuits that support discipline and follow-through. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that controls planning and decision-making, operates best when there is a clearly defined target. If your goals are vague, like be healthier or work harder, your brain struggles to allocate attention and energy because it doesn't have a specific direction to channel them. When you create clear, concrete goals, you give your brain a map, and this map reduces mental friction, making it easier to take action. Clarity also taps into the brain's dopamine system, which is responsible for motivation. Dopamine isn't just released when you achieve a reward, it's released when you move toward a specific, meaningful target. When you define a clear goal, such as exercise for 20 minutes today or write 300 words before lunch, your brain releases dopamine each time you make progress toward it. This progress feedback loop is what keeps you engaged and focused even when the work feels difficult. Without a clear goal, you miss out on this motivational boost, which makes it easier to procrastinate or give up halfway through. Breaking big goals into smaller, measurable steps is one of the most effective strategies for harnessing this system. Instead of focusing on a distant outcome like run a marathon, break it into small, daily actions. Run 1 mile 3 times a week, gradually increase your distance, and track your progress. Each time you hit a small milestone, you give your brain a hit of dopamine that reinforces the behavior and strengthens your commitment. This is why people who track their habits, whether on paper, on an app, or mentally, are often more consistent. They're using their brain's reward circuitry to stay motivated. Another critical factor is visualization. When you spend a few minutes each day visualizing your goal and what it will feel like to achieve it, you activate many of the same neural pathways you'll use when taking the real-world actions. This primes your brain to recognize opportunities and make choices that align with your goal. It also strengthens the emotional connection to the outcome, which can be a powerful source of motivation when discipline feels difficult. Clear goals also protect you from decision fatigue. Every decision you make throughout the day draws on your mental energy. And when your goals are undefined, you end up making far more decisions than necessary. Should I work out today? Should I start now or later? Should I write or check my email first? By setting clear goals and timeframes ahead of time, you remove unnecessary decision points and free up mental energy to actually do the work. This is why routines are so powerful. They automate decisions so your willpower can be reserved for moments when it's really needed. Equally important is making your goals meaningful. The brain is much more willing to expend energy on tasks that are connected to a sense of purpose. If your goal is simply to meet someone else's expectations or to avoid guilt, it will be harder to sustain. When you tie your goals to a deeper why, whether it's improving your health so you can be present for your family, or growing your career to contribute more to the world, you activate intrinsic motivation. This type of motivation is more durable and doesn't rely solely on external rewards.